Hello, I'm Silviu Itescu. I'm Chief Executive at Mesoblast. I'll be presenting an updated corporate presentation. We're developing therapies for severe inflammatory conditions that are life-threatening. We are the leader in allogeneic or off-the-shelf cellular medicines for inflammatory diseases. We are duly listed on NASDAQ and the ASX. We've got a platform technology, two lead products. One is called remestemcel, the second is called rexlemestrocel, and each of them have got multiple indications. We have an extensive global intellectual property portfolio with over 1,000 patents granted, as well as applications in all the major markets, potentially giving us composition of matter, as well as indications and methods of manufacturing through at least 2041, in particular the US and other major markets. And we have an FDA-inspected commercial scale manufacturing process that will underpin our product launches and commercialization. This is a snapshot of the science behind our technology platform. Our mesenchymal lineage precursor stromal cells have on their surface receptors that are able to be bound by inflammatory cytokines, which are present in cytokine storm situations in diseases that are devastating due to the severe inflammatory condition. The cells, when activated by these inflammatory signals, release a number of factors that then, in concert, turn off the severe damaging inflammation. So essentially, our cells are the conductors of an anti-inflammatory orchestra. And the types of diseases that we aim to turn off are those diseases that are potentially life-threatening due to the severe inflammation that accompanies them. This clinical slide shows the maturity of our portfolio and our pipeline. In dark blue is Ryoncil, our lead product candidate, or generically remestemcel. The Ryoncil product is currently in front of the FDA, awaiting review for approval for pediatric graft versus host disease. It is also being developed for the adult form of that disease, as well as inflammatory bowel disease and Crohn's. The second platform technology product, Revascor, or rexlemestrocel, is being developed and is in phase 3 for both heart failure and inflammatory back pain. And for inflammatory heart failure, we've had recent guidance from the FDA that it's in line for a potential accelerated approval. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very deep patent portfolio up to 2043 in the US, covering these cells manufactured by a variety of processes derived from different sources and for many indications. So our patent estate will provide us with particularly US market exclusivity for many years to come, post-approval and launch. Now, we've had multiple very positive regulatory interactions with the FDA in the past quarter. For our lead product, Ryoncil, in pediatric graft versus host disease, the FDA informed us that after additional consideration, the available clinical data from our phase 3 study, MSB GVHD 001, appears to be sufficient to support submission of the proposed biological license application for the product Ryoncil for treatment of children with steroid-refractory acute graft versus host disease. So we expect to be filing this documentation imminently. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, we had a very good meeting with the FDA where they saw the results of 2 large randomized controlled studies of Revascor in patients with moderate to severe and end-stage heart failure. And the combination of those 2 studies resulted in the FDA supporting an accelerated approval pathway in patients with end-stage ischemic heart failure with reduced ejection fraction and being kept alive by a ventricular assist device. Finally, thirdly, we also received notification from the FDA that we're eligible to receive a priority review voucher for children with a devastating congenital heart disease called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, This was based on the results of a randomized controlled trial that was published a couple of months ago. We now have both a rare disease voucher designation and an orphan drug designation. And we will be having follow-up meetings with the FDA to talk about what a submission for potential approval for this devastating complication looks like. We expect to substantially advance our multiple product pipeline over the next 6 to 12 months in 3 main areas. Ryoncil for steroid-refractory GVHD is on track for BLA approval in the next 2 to 6 months post-filing. Then we will be doing a study in adult patients for label extension to expand the indication from children to adults. Revascor for heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, having had a meeting with the FDA that puts us on track for a potential filing for accelerated approval, we need to have a further pre-BLA meeting to discuss the totality of the clinical data and the potency assay data and the manufacturing data that will go into a BLA, and we expect to have that meeting second half of this year. And finally, the rexlemestrocel for inflammatory back pain has already completed 1 phase 3 trial, and a second confirmatory phase 3 trial is now underway with investigators, trial sites, and contractual arrangements in place. Patient screening and enrollment has been initiated, and we expect to have first dosing this quarter. Our financials that we reported in the last quarter, we completed an entitlement offer and an institutional placement, which raised 97 million Australian dollars. We have a cash balance report as of March 31st of 117 million Australian, which is about 76 million US. Our net operating cash spend was 11.7 million US for the quarter ended March 31st, which represents a 28% reduction in net operating cash spend from the comparative quarter the prior year. We will continue to maintain our focus on cutting costs, preserving cash for the remaining of the year, whilst continuing to work on corporate and strategic initiatives to access commercial distribution channels, supplement cost of development, and strengthen our balance sheet. Now, just an update on where we are with our steroid-refractory GVHD program and submission for remestemcel. It's a devastating complication that affects multiple organs, including the liver, the gut, and the skin. And in the severe form of this disease, mortality approaches 80 to 90%. If you focus on the market opportunity component of this slide, more than 30,000 allogeneic transplants are performed annually, at least 10,000 in the US and growing, and about 20% of these are in children. Our strategy is to target children first and then grow the market to cover adults as well. As I've mentioned earlier, Mesoblast was informed by the FDA after the Type C meeting that we just had this quarter that the clinical data that has been submitted previously to the FDA appears sufficient to support submission of the BLA, and that's exactly what we're doing. We intend to file this quarter, imminently, the documentation for the BLA filing, and we potentially will have an approval in the second half of this year for Ryoncil. We have a focused strategy to first gain pediatric approval, have reimbursement for the product, and then move into the adult indication straight after approval. The pathway for approval in adults, we believe, is in patients who've failed the only approved drug, which is ruxolitinib. About 40 to 50% of patients who are adults who are treated with ruxolitinib fail. And for those patients, survival is of the order of 25%. In contrast, under compassionate use in a substantial number of patients already, we've demonstrated the same patient population has a 67% survival when they're treated with our product Ryoncil. And so we expect that we will do a single-arm study in this patient population after the product's approved for children. This is a market that is about 5 times bigger than the pediatric market. And again, targeting those patients who failed ruxolitinib will provide us with 40 to 50% of the market, which is really all of the severe cases who otherwise would die. We have a partnership with the Blood and Bone Marrow Transplant Network in the US, which is a clinical organization that is responsible for about 80% of US transplants. They will conduct this trial, and we will have much more detail about the trial and its timelines, etc., post the approval of the product for children. Now, for the heart failure program, a different product altogether, rexlemestrocel, our second generation. This has been already completed 2 large randomized controlled trials. And this is a big unmet need. We're targeting ischemic heart failure, which results in about 50% mortality over 5 years. This patient population not only has a high risk of death, but also recurrent major adverse events like heart attacks and strokes. And despite the fact that there's a number of new drugs on the market for treatment of heart failure, they do not have a major effect on these adverse cardiac events, which include heart attacks, strokes, and death. We targeted these advanced patients, class 2, 3, on the right of this slide, and we also targeted end-stage patients, class 4 and beyond, in our 2 randomized controlled trials of trial 1, 537 patients, trial 2, 159 patients. So large numbers of patients have completed enrollment with this product at the extreme end of this disease, where mortality is high. And in published data that we published last year in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, we showed a reduction of heart attacks or strokes by as much as 75% in this randomized controlled trial, and an overall reduction in heart attacks, strokes, or death by as much as 37%. These results were highly significant, and they formed the basis of going to the FDA together with the results from the second trial in end-stage patients with ventricular assist device implants. So the data presented to the FDA were a combination of the 2 trials, and in the most advanced form of the disease, where the patients had a ventricular assist device implant, we were able to significantly improve or increase the proportion of patients who could be successfully have their device turned off, and that was associated with an 82% reduction in mortality. On that basis, the FDA felt that this, together with the supportive data from the largest study over 30 months, where we also saw a reduction in mortality and the 3-point MACE reduction, that together we were eligible to apply for an accelerated approval without any further clinical data. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be requesting a pre-BLA meeting second half of this year to talk about timing for our accelerated approval in the most severe group of patients. And I've touched on the priority review rare pediatric designation, which really says that if we get our product approved for children with the devastating complication of a hypoplastic left heart syndrome, we'll be eligible to receive a certificate which can be sold, and the pricing for these type of certificates that other pharmaceutical companies pay, because they provide a reduction in required timelines for any drug to be approved. They're fungible. So a pediatric rare disease voucher can be on-sold for anywhere from $75 to $125 million. So we're eligible to get one of those, subject to having an approval for children with this devastating complication. So that's a focus for the company also in the second half of this year. Finally, the third major focus is the severe inflammatory back pain complication that we're treating with rexlemestrocel in the second phase 3 trial. Suffice to say that there are at least 7 million people a year in the US alone who suffer with inflammatory disc disease with severe pain in the back, not responsive to traditional anti-inflammatory drugs or even opioids. And this is our target market. This, if we're successful, is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. You know, we've made a lot of inroads here. We've got regulatory alignment with the FDA. We have an agreed upon phase 3 protocol with an endpoint that would, if met, give us approval for the product. We've manufactured it, and the phase 3 trial for confirmation of the prior results, which show that a single injection gives us at least 3 years of pain relief, but with now a primary endpoint of 12 months of pain relief, is now underway. And I think that is it. My time is up. Thank you very much for hearing me out. We look forward to a very exciting next few months.